Good afternoon. This is Professor Amina Dean, and I always get tickled by our disclaimer because it disclaims the views of the guest, but it forgets to disclaim mine. This is Muslim Network TV, and this is Critical Talk. Today and tomorrow, we're going to talk about different levels of abuse in the community. These are sensitive topics, but they are critical topics for us to get on the path to being healthy communities and model communities in that health. We have heard about abuses of clergy and other faith communities and have been shocked by sometimes how long the abuse has gone on. Well, most of the time, by how long the abuse is going on. But today, I have with me a young lady who is going to get it ahead of the pack, so to speak. Her name is Alia Salem, and she's the founder and executive director of Facing Abuse in Community Environments, FACE. Her professional background is in communication, organizational development, and community organizing, which she's done a hell of a job with, by the way. Alia is also co-founder of the Palestine Action Committee of Texas, ACT, for those of you who don't know that group and may wish to look at it, and an active board member with the North Texas Fair Housing Center. She is a proud Roddenberry Fellow alumna and a Dallas Public Voices Fellow in the On Ed Project. She is a published writer and a public speaker, and her work has been featured on many major media outlets globally. She is a graduate of University of Texas, Arlington, with a degree in interdisciplinary studies, with her three foci of study in communication, sociology, and religious culture. That's a wonderful resume, and I hope the young women are listening so that they see you can major in stuff and get skills and use those skills toward some activism. Assalamu alaikum, Alia.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi
I
wa barakatuh.
you a little bit ago, and then we got on a treadmill trying to catch you again. And you're sitting there in what Chicago would say was minor, but for Texas is a blizzard, is an outage, and all of these other stuff. So my heart goes out, and hopefully you'll make it through. I
I
want
do
to
hope
talk
so.
about FACE. I was introduced to FACE by another person we know, Nisa Muhammad, and I just got fascinated. Beautiful website for all of you out there who want to find out more about this organization. Just type in facetogether.org. There's so much information there that you will see the tediousness and also the integrity with which they face cases. So I'm going to shut up and let you talk to us about FACE.
Well, jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. I feel so thrilled and privileged to be here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. My name is Alia Salem, as she said, and I'm super excited to be on this particular program because we don't often get to share our work in this format, and so it's exciting to be able to reach your viewers and listeners to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart because almost 4 years ago, I founded this organization in the aftermath of a young woman coming forward and decrying the abuse that she had experienced at the hands of her religious leader who had groomed her and manipulated her into an unlawful sexual act and interaction. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, I was, just a community organizer who her mother reached out to. And when I tell you, Professor Amina, that it was heart-wrenching to see that our community had nothing to deal with this issue, nothing to authoritatively sort of at least put a wrench in the, cycle that was happening. There was nothing. There was nobody that was doing anything strategically,
Right.
and just few independent pieces of information out there, but nothing substantial. And so my, org development side kicked into overdrive, and I found an opportunity to help fill an actual needs gap.
Mhm.
We're always, lamenting how many relief organizations we have, and DAWA organizations that we have, and we have nothing to hold leaders accountable. And so that was,
Exactly.
there was a real needs gap. And I knew that, my background is it's one spoke in the wheel of all of this, right? It's just a piece. And a lot of people are like, who died and made you the accountability queen? And I'm like, well, all the leaders who never did this before me. So basically,
When people say that, it says that they haven't done a damn thing.
That's right.
And they're going to crush those who move to do something.
And accountability is not rocket science.
Exactly.
This is a community saying, we want the best leaders. You
Right.
can't abuse people, and you can't abuse your position of power.
Right.
And this shouldn't be something that's inaccessible to a layperson. And
Right.
so with whatever skills I had, I brought in other subject matter experts and built a discipline. So as you mentioned, my background is interdisciplinary
Right.
studies and approaches to things. And so I used that to say, there's a new discipline that needs to be created, and it's an interdisciplinary discipline.
Right.
And it combines law, mental health, Islamic theology, investigative journalism, grassroots organizing, finance, and organizational development. And with those 7 disciplines, we've created this process by which to address a very particular aspect of community accountability that looks like getting to the bottom of these things and doing it in a way that's victim-centered and community-centered. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 4 years. And we're really, I think this year is going to be a big, watershed moment. It was a watershed moment to start the work. And now this year is going to be like, can we sustain it? So that's kind of where we're at in doing all of this. And it's just been a wild ride.
Well, I want to come back to that, but because sustainability, and I'm on a mission, women run founded organizations have the most trouble getting support.
Yeah.
And I'm on a mission singing that song as loud as I can. And women need to get behind, women who have taken on humongous tasks.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you now, FACE deals with sexual, physical, financial, and spiritual abuse. And I'm encouraging everybody, please go to this website. I mean, it is fascinating. The website is a mini MINI course in and of itself. But talk about the different kinds. Well, let's start with spiritual abuse.
Oh, to talk about like the definition and how it looks?
Yeah.
Sure. So
I don't think, when you go to the website, it talks about people using the Quran and other tertiary sources to carve out something that suits them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give your viewers a textbook definition. This is the definition that we've developed from other definitions. So this is the definition that we go by, right, to kind of look at it from an abuse and how do we hold accountable. So spiritual abuse, using religion to manipulate, control, and bully through the guise of religion, religious principles, or claims to spirituality. Most of the time, people who are perpetrators of abuse, they will conduct one of the other three abuses, physical, sexual, financial abuse. And there will be an added element of spiritual abuse. So they will use their religiosity or their religious knowledge to say that this other violation is acceptable and they know better. So we've had that happen quite frequently, that there is, when a religious leader specifically, or somebody who's engaging or working within the Muslim community, when they want to justify whatever's happening, justify the abuse, they'll have like an obscure teaching that they'll use, or they will say, yeah, and they'll say, or I know better because I am this person. Our second case that we reported on, the individual said words just like that, or allegations of people engaging in secret marriages, concealed marriages, we call them. And there's no witnesses, there's no contract, there's no nothing. And saying things like, oh, well, I know better. I do this for a living.
Yeah.
Listen to me. I could go on and on and on. But basically, most of the time it shows up as an addendum, right? It shows up as an attachment to another form of abuse. But there are cases when people are manipulated into beliefs and environments solely by utilizing scripture or Quranic exegesis, etc., and theological principles to brainwash individuals into signing up for this group. We have cults. There are cults in our tradition, not in our tradition, but in our community.
Right.
And they're full out brainwashing and manipulating people's minds. That is a really big task to undertake. And so it's not something that we still have a lot of building blocks to set on top of one another before we're really meaningfully engaging in that. But spiritual abuse, summing up, most of the time looks like an attachment to another form of abuse to excuse it, but can have aspects that stand completely on their own.
Before we go into the other types of abuses, you've made me wonder, and I've often tried to teach women. Because the women are participating because of the abuse and the use of this, that, and the other. But it's also their parents. As an Islamic legal expert, I work on a bunch of cases, and I've seen worked on cases where the parents side with the abuser because they don't want to experience the shame in the community of accusing someone of an abuse. And I'm saying, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Give me a break here. What kind of education for younger women who are sitting in these Quran classes, these dars, these this, these that, and the other, thinking that they're getting a real education, but the imam or the teacher is seeing who his next victim can be.
Professor Amina, why are you doing me like that?
Hey, I've been doing it for 30 years.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's something that the community, people want to believe that they are the bearers of the commandments that say, speak out firmly for justice, even if it's against yourself or your kin. They want to believe that they are the ones who say, if you see something wrong, change it with your hands. If not, change it with your mouth. If not, change it or feel bad about it in your heart. They want to believe that that's who they are. But they're only that way as a whole when it comes to outsiders outside of our community harming us.
Exactly.
They don't do that when it comes to themselves or their kin. And the overwhelming challenge that I see that is stopping all of this from actually having that, transformational moment,
Right.
is the protection of reputation.
Yeah.
Over and over, the excuse is given: protect the reputation of the Muslims. We're already so besieged.
Yeah, but everybody's looking at you. You ain't hiding nothing.
Yeah. Don't air our dirty laundry, sister.
Mhm.
Like, they're already Fox News,
Exactly.
whatever. They're already, why are you bringing out our dirty laundry publicly, right? And on the other hand, you have people who are saying, oh, well, forgive the, is this for me?
What? No, ignore. Ignore. Ignore.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Is it okay?
Yeah, ignore the chat.
Oh, okay. It disappeared. Sorry. So we said protection of the Muslim community, right? That, oh, we're so besieged, and stop airing our dirty laundry. And then protection of the institutions, right? The mosques, the brick and mortar places, whatever that framework is. There's this, obsession with, oh, I have an amana to protect this institution. No, you have an amana to protect the people in that institution. Like, yes, sure, set that institution up for success and do what you're supposed to do, but not at the expense of the people. And then there's protect personal reputations,
Right.
board members' reputations, the predator or the perpetrator's reputation.
Right.
We don't even think. The last item we think about is protection of the victim's reputation.
Exactly.
Protection
But
of that person's.
That happens in many religious communities.
Oh, this is not endemic to the Muslim community at all.
We're a cesspool for perversion.
It is literally, I'll give everybody a great example of how I learned. It will look exactly the same, just with different language around it, no matter what community. So we're not alone in this.
Right.
And the same reasons are given. Reputational protection. Reputational protection is the reason why people cover this stuff up.
Right.
A really good example is when I first started FACE, I reached out to the SNAP headquarters, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests.
Right.
And their managing director at the time, Barb Doris, she and I were talking, and I was like, here's this thing I'm grappling with. Do you have any words of advice? And she said, Alia, the abuse looks the same, and the predator's actions and the perpetrator's actions look the same no matter what community you're in.
Right.
And she said, I explained to her that first situation I was dealing with, and I said, what do you think about it? And she goes, I've heard that one too many times. That type of situation is so common. And she said, he's going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe not in that order, but this is what's going to happen next. Here's what you need to prepare yourself for. And Professor Amina, listen, if it wasn't in that order, I was shocked. And for somebody who is from a Catholic tradition, has barely any knowledge of the Muslim community, and she laid it out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's what happened. He did
Exactly.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that was a light bulb moment for me where I realized this is a problem that is a human condition and
Yeah.
that is a faith-based condition. And one of the reasons I call it FACE, and that it has no, yes, it's run by Muslims. Yes, we're addressing it in the Muslim community, but there may come a time, we've already consulted for people outside the Muslim tradition. There
Right.
may come a time when we grow to a point where we can serve other communities
Exactly.
and that we can help them. It's the language is going to be different. We
Right.
need experts from those traditions as well to help craft
Right.
language. But FACE has no Islamic sort of taste to it in the core identity of it. And people really need to understand that once we start getting to the root problem, which is endemic to all communities,
Right.
then we're actually going to be able to start addressing it meaningfully.
Okay, I want to take a few minute break. You can get some water. You can have water while you're talking. Um, and we'll be right back. This is Professor Amina Al-Din, and I'm with Alia Salem, and we're having a very sensitive conversation about facing abuse. We'll be right back. This is Professor Amin Al-Din with Muslim Network TV on Critical Talk with Alia Salim, talking about a very sensitive issue facing abuse inside of our communities and all religious communities. For some reason, perhaps it's the kind of authority that is there that drives abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And also on the other end, it is the shame, reputation destroying, cancel culture, all of this other stuff that people have to face. But we don't want to be a community with little cults inside, whether it's sex cults or polygynous cults or other kinds of things. We are destroying women who are the primary victims. I'm sure that there's some young men that are victims also, but we have to talk. So I want to go back. Well, I want to add to sexual and physical abuse. What kind of abuses, actual abuses, are we talking about?
Well, gird your loins.
Oh, I'm ready.
Yeah. We're talking about pretty much everything. So physical, sexual, financial, and spiritual abuse. And what that translates to is everything from, small boundary violations, like inappropriate, such as maybe inappropriate touching or, like touching on the shoulder or things like that go beyond Islamic norms, all the way down the line, concealed marriages, physical abuse. We're facing some, parochial schools, some Islamic schools that use corporal punishment as a means for disciplining and beating the children, basically. all the way down the line to rape and sexual assault of children, all the way to adults. And then somewhere in the middle of all of that is, what do you call it? Oh my gosh. Embezzlement and fraud and all these different, blackmail and such to engage in some sort of private inurement or private benefit, financial benefit from themselves using donor funds and what have you.
Okay, so there. And how I read on the site this meticulous research. I loved it. I know it takes time, it takes energy, and you have to have investigators who either you train how to do an investigation or who are already trained.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking our viewership, please, if you want to learn how to be trained, if you already have some training, please offer it to this group. In a little bitty piece. But I know that there are many folk out there. They are, what do you call it? Legal, what's that term? They assist the lawyers.
Oh, paralegals?
There are lots of, well, there are several Muslim paralegals I know, but I'm sure that they're out there across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can donate 10, 15 hours a week to help this alone, not only to investigate cases, because Alia also wants to educate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is a critical portion also. How do young men and women know? I mean, I think they kind of grow up with these boundaries, but they don't know them when they're coming from a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be the imam or the teacher of a course or any of those things. I think the boundaries get so blurred because there's an authority standing in front of me that I lose all my sense.
Mm-hmm. It is very much part of our ingrained culture that people in positions of power are to be revered at a different status than other individuals are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, how we fall into the trap that many have fallen into of deifying especially their religious leaders, and putting them on this godlike pedestal. And I have on many occasions talked to victims who believed their religious leaders to be ordained by God to be placed there as a divine, spiritual leader.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. And mainstream Muslim community, we're not talking about some, offshoot that's questionable as to whether or not, these discussions or controversy around who's Muslim and who's not Muslim. No, I'm talking about mainstream Sunni communities that have created this very cloistered environment, cult-like environment, where these people have been elevated to this godlike status to the point where it is okay for them to abuse little children. It is okay for them to, engage in all sorts of sexual activity with their congregants and their counselees and their students, etc. And so you have everything in this bucket, right? You have things that are truly evil and nefarious and gut-wrenching. And then at the same time, you have people who are, boundary wanderers, what we call. And they're people who, it's like they're starting to dip their toe into inappropriate behavior,
Right.
a touch on the shoulder, an inappropriate compliment, things like that. That happens very frequently. But you have this other really nefarious stuff that stems from this, this culture ingrainment of these religious leaders, from respect all the way up to godlike status, right?
You
And
know, it's interesting that I mean, you're saying what many say in closed spaces. You know, how did this get to be this way? And I think that some way or other, the women have got to talk to each other. You know, I mean, I'm old now, but when I was young, if the man put his hand on my side, what you doing? What's your problem? But that's a different culture,
yeah.
you know? And oh no, you did, as loud as I could say it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think in some cultures, women are groomed to be silent.
Yeah.
And whatever is happening to them just happens. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and they have to bear the shame and or the trauma
Mm-hmm.
that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
What are we gonna do?
One of the reasons, so when we talked, when I spoke to you and Sister Nisa and the other ladies that were in our call,
Mhm.
one of the reasons why it's so important that we have a proper representation of Muslimin from all different walks and categories and ethnicities and cultures and things within FACE, and to be part of the knowledge repertoire of FACE and the founding understanding of FACE, is for that exact reason.
Uh-huh.
There are women, for example, that come from the Black community, the community that was born and raised as part of a Muslim culture within the United States,
Right.
from Black Muslims who are converts to the tradition, etc., who are looking at the ways that maybe people from other ethnic backgrounds do things, and they're like, wait, hold on a
Uh-huh.
minute,
Like, why did
and
you do
and like this doesn't mesh. Converts versus, in born Muslims, right? Converts or reverts will see what's happening from a cultural perspective and say, well, just a minute,
that?
wait a
Uh-huh.
minute, this is. And then people who are cultural, I mean, who were born into Islam or born into a Muslim environment, will see things that people who were maybe have reverted to the tradition will be like, well, wait a minute, and so there's these deep teachings that balance each other out. That's one paradigm, right?
Right.
That's just one dynamic out of all the dynamics: men versus women, ages, etc., all these demographic backgrounds that challenge the things that don't pass the gut check. They don't pass the standards for accountability and for surat al-mustaqim, right? The middle path, right? And so if we create this more holistic environment where we're not negating our differences, right? We're not blind to one another's differences.
Mhm.
We're not
But we're
saying that it's bad. Yeah, we're not valuing it. We're just saying, hey, that's different, but let's learn from each other.
yeah.
That is why this community accountability model is so important, because those types of ways that we see each other marginalized, or that we see our sisters, especially, you're so right, women are overwhelming the victims
Mhm.
in the majority of these cases, that when we see that happening, there are ways that Islam has shown us through other, cultures, and through, different Islamic principles of how we can show up to that, how we can confront that, how we can empower each other. And we're honestly much stronger together if we embrace each other's differences instead of trying to ignore them.
Well, let me, before we go to the question, um, I'm just, well, let's go to the question. What are some resources someone can turn to if they feel they can't speak out about their abuse?
So there's a few different resources. It It depends on what you're experiencing. If it's abuse at the hands of a religious or a community leader, we encourage people to, something I want to make clear is what our process actually entails. So a little snippet of that might be helpful for folks.
Yes, it is.
Is that if somebody comes to our website, you're going to get some stuff that you don't have to engage with anybody to have access to. We've got on our Instagram page lots of videos you can listen to and watch. We've got little teachings, little graphics to help, increase your knowledge, etc. But you can also, if you've actually experienced a case of abuse at the hands of a religious or a community leader, you can report it to us. You don't risk anything by reporting it. What happens is that when you report something, it is confidential. Only the FACE investigative team sees it, and we will be able to look at it and say, consider it for an investigation, and we'll reach out to you for more information, to conduct an intake, and then you will have the opportunity to give consent for us to open an investigation. Once we open an investigation, you can't take it back because we have to protect and make it objective. But you do have the opportunity to say yes or no as to whether we use your allegation to conduct an investigation. The other piece is sometimes people want to report abuse and it may not quite fall within our bucket, but we're there to give you resources. So we can direct you. I believe Peaceful Families Project, their executive director is going to be on your show. We can direct you to organizations like Peaceful Families Project, like FYI, Family and Youth Institute, the Khalid Center, Heart Women and Girls. These organizations that are doing a lot of this work, we can get you in contact with the right people if it is not something that we fall into, or if you choose not to let us use your allegation. The great thing about the allegation part is that once you've reported it, you've reported it. And if there's ever a situation where somebody calls and asks about a background check, we can always, without identifying the person who made the allegation, we can always say, oh, an allegation has been made about this person. There's no investigation. We haven't substantiated it, but it's forever enshrined in this documented sort of environment where your voice meant something, right? But it's a very risky process for us to engage in investigation.
Reporting abuse always is. We're going to take another minute or two break, and we'll be right back. This is Professor Amina Dean, and I'm talking, the show should be 2 hours, with Alia Salem about FACE and facing abuse and all of the things that FACE can do for you. But I'm going to push some of the things you can help with supporting FACE. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Professor Amina Dean on Critical Talk, a program of Muslim Network TV. And I hate to say it's wonderful, but let me choose some other. I'm having an informative and educational time with Alia Salem, who is the executive director of FACE and we're facing the abuse that is in our community, I think that it is so important that, while we are not, we are ahead of the game before it blows up by someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was thinking about is the young women, because if we have leaders kind of snatching these girls into sex, thinking about, well, you be my third wife or whatever, then they are not eligible in some communities to marry.
Mm.
When all of the hoopla and the divorce happens, and or I'm getting rid of you kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing happens,
Mm-hmm.
they're not, I mean, they're no longer virgins.
Mm.
One. Number two, legally in the United States, they are not they are not afforded the rights of the legal wife.
Mm-hmm.
If they have kids, more likely than not, those kids will wind up in communities as being spoken of as bastards.
Mm.
I mean, there's so many potential results from all of this, and many of the young women don't know what they're getting themselves into. And obviously, their mothers don't know either.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Who
It's no, so FACE doesn't have an official stance on polygyny, but I will say,
I do.
no, girl, I didn't say I didn't. I said FACE doesn't.
Mm.
But so, I come from an education where my imam said that he believes that it is haram in this community because the rights of the second wife, third wife, fourth wife are not protected at all. There's no means of legal protection. And in that case, it nullifies the legality of it. There's lots of opinions on that. The point I think that you have to focus on when we're talking about a community environment, there is primary and secondary victims, or there are, primary and secondary victims.
Mm.
And I think that it is important that we understand that the crux of this work is, did they abuse their position of power? This really comes down to, does a person have the opportunity to provide meaningful consent to an interaction?
Right.
Right? So in 17 states in the United States of America, in 17 states, it is a felony to engage in sexual conduct with a congregant, for a clergy member to engage in sexual conduct with a congregant, even if there is a verbal element of consent.
Right.
Why is that the case? Because the law recognizes that the power disparity doesn't allow for meaningful consent.
Right.
So that's one thing that we need to focus on. There is an aspect within Islamic or Islamic tradition called haraj. Haraj meaning the undue influence or the abuse of power. That's at the crux of what we're trying to combat.
Yeah.
We're not here to say that a man who has entered into a nikah with two different women, and both of those women there was no power differential, etc., and both of those women entered into that interaction lawfully, consenting, and they're of sound mind, and there's no power disparity, etc. We're not here to regulate that. That's people's business. But when you do that with a minor,
right,
when you do that with somebody who you're counseling,
right,
we've had numerous cases where an imam has counseled a woman for divorce suggested she should get a divorce, and inserted himself as someone who could marry her. This
Right.
is forbidden in Islam. Forbidden. It's a term
Well,
called
it's forbidden by his ethical code in
ex-
counseling.
exactly. However, not all of our masajid have those ethical codes in place. There is no licensing board for mashayikh in the United States, right? So if they're a chaplain, great. They may have a license as a chaplain and you can utilize that. But our mashayikh and our community leaders, there's no such thing. So we have to get to the root of the problem. We're not interested in private sin. We're not interested in dealing with polygyny when it's in a consenting environment. The only times our work comes at the crossroads of that is when somebody has abused their position of power to gain access to a person, and a power disparity exists that doesn't allow for meaningful consent. This is both an Islamic violation and, more often than not, a legal violation. And so that's what I want people to understand, that it really comes down to, and we're seeing more and more that there are young women who are 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, whose parents consented on their behalf, and they entered into a nikah with a religious leader at a minor age, and they said, oh, well, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, right? And so they're using this as an example to bypass, secular law or what have you. And there are states that don't have a problem with this. Let's be clear. There are states in which it's okay with parental consent to marry a minor.
And the parents are doing. Look at the question on your screen. Sarah Shafiq is saying, Jazakallah for this important work. What is the difference between what FACE does and what the Herma Project, led by Professor Ingrid Mattson, does?
So that's a great question. The Herma Project, Herma meaning sacred inviolability of a person. The Herma Project serves an extremely important role in not only pushing dialogue and conversation and teaching, but also to pave the way for institutions to achieve that level of accountability through frameworks, through accreditation, through possible licensing, etc. And so they've worked with and started to work with different institutions on dealing with this issue from an academic perspective, a scholarly perspective. So we were honored to participate in the first ever Hurma convention, or symposium, if you will. It was January 2020, right before lockdown. And we flew to Chicago and we presented our own, information on this topic. And they brought together minds from all over the world to be able to come together in a convening and have this important conversation of subject matter experts and lay people who've, come into the crossroads of this work. So they're very much paving the academic and scholarly dialogue around this topic and doing the lion's share of that that work that engages the thought leaders. We're very much on the ground doing the work within the more the grassroots organizing work and the communications work to drive conversation in communities, to investigate, substantiate claims, provide information for the public to be able to access and hold their leaders accountable, etc. So we both are doing very
similar,
compatible work towards the same goal with different tactics, and we're huge fans of the Hurma Project.
Well, I think you talked about how the different things Peaceful Families dealing with domestic abuse. You're dealing with leadership in abusing authority, and then Herma is coming in and getting some writings and some other stuff done. I mean, that's a perfect linkage.
And not to mention, Insheikh's Clothing has done the lion's share of public information production, content production.
Oh,
Or Insheikh's Clothing. They have
can you type that in the chat? So
absolutely. They have done an amazing amount of content production.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I'm a hunter and a pecker on this keyboard. Sorry, y'all.
Okay.
Insheikhsclothing.com.
Mm-hmm.
They produce a lot of really, excellent educational material, different case studies. The founder, Danish Qasem, he is a coach. He's a licensed coach and has helped, guide people through different subjects and topics and things like that. They're not a frontline, organization doing victim-centered, triaging type of work. They're much more around the, content educational piece, thought leadership piece to help people kind of understand some of these frameworks and share what they've been seeing. They've talked to a lot of people in leadership positions, but also congregants and what they've experienced. And in some cases helped people to overcome, especially when there are cult-like environments, help them to overcome these dynamics that they're seeing and kind of work their way through back to a better path of health and wholeness. So they're a great resource to get information as well.
So, Alia, how can Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk assist in this work? Do we need to have a webinar? Do we need to have more conversations like this? How can we assist?
That's a great question and such a welcome one. 2021, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, this is a milestone year, a watershed moment for us to find out whether or not we're going to be sustainable. And that marker is, can we grow this organization beyond our 2 people? And growing this organization means 2 things. It means helping people to become familiar with our work, because we know that once people become familiar with our work, they're going to want to support us, because this is, I'm trying, I am a humble person. However, this work is groundbreaking, and it's amazing and fantastic. And I am so completely honored to be able to do it. But I know that once people start really knowing about it on a wide scale, they'll want to support this work. It's critical work. So it's twofold: exposing people to the work and then welcoming them in as our supporters in all the different ways that you can, through volunteer, through prayers, through financial support. So we have training that is available. It's called Safe Sacred Spaces, and the other one is called How Does Faith Work? And our Safe Sacred Spaces is really our flagship training piece that offers a 1 hour, a 2 hour, a 4 hour, and an 8 hour course that helps people. And the 4 hour and the 8 hour get you a little certification. It's not like a college degree, so calm down.
It's still great.
But we'll give you a certificate.
Okay.
And so if you participate in that, if you get 10 people or more from your community to be able to participate, we can conduct that for you. If it's an institution that's providing it, there is a fee for it. But we have them regularly online I think it's like 2 or 3 times a year, either the Safe Sacred Spaces or the How Does Faith Work. To help people. So hosting one of those is great. And for your viewers, as a courtesy for inviting us and having this conversation, if you wanted to hold one, we would do that absolutely at no cost whatsoever. It would be free for all your attendees. So we'd love to do that. Especially our work and our partnership together is so valuable to us and what we're trying to do. That would just be a great honor to be able to provide that for your viewers.
Thank you. This is Professor Amina Al-Din. I have spent one of the fastest hours. I got a ton of questions, so I'm going to have her back. Alia Salem, who is the Executive Director of Face Together. Please go on the website, check it out, see how you can join in, and Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Stay around.